We're now delighted to have Pramod Varma, co-chair of the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, deliver a keynote address on the past, present, and future of DPIs.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I think the speakers before me has set this up exceptionally well. Very, very well set up for the 20 minutes or so. Okay, you're readjusting to 80 minutes. All right, 20 minutes I have to speak about a little bit of past, current, and most importantly, where we are going with this. I think the idea of technology for societal development is not new. It's been there. And India has been, for the people who are not familiar, India is really largest, most populous nation on earth, 1.4 billion people, 22 official languages. There's no single language that binds us other than maybe English, but it's only for the top of the society. And this diversity necessitated India to look at slightly different way to create non-uniform but unified infrastructure for diverse solution and inclusion. While inclusion was the primary agenda, inclusion of large section of the society was the primary agenda, we also balanced innovation. I think that was a interesting learning that we got in. And the first 10 years or so, 15 years, we primarily focused on three things. And they started with our identity project. I don't know where it's on. Okay. What did that primarily drive is the formalization, the initial formalization of the society. So the identity starts to become the starting point of people to be recognized in the system. So a system to recognize their people, identity plays an important role, registries plays an important role, attestations plays important role. So we started doing that. And it's not only India. If you look at Morocco, we have here folks from there who led that project, or Philippines, very large number of people who have been starting to bring into digital identity to the world. So digital identity actually grew from nobody having an identity to 1 billion people having identity in about 6 years, 6.5 years in India, right? So this was a massive formalization. But that's not the purpose of identity, was not to give identity. Purpose of identity was to provide products, services on top of identity. And that's where we moved into this next layer of transformation primarily with respect to financial inclusion. And that drove from bank account opening, access to accounts, and most importantly, access to payments, both P2P, P2M payments, but even more importantly, G2P payments. India continues to be a large part of Indian budget, continues to go towards the subsidies. And it's grown over years, quite large amount of subsidy. And the ability for the government to give subsidy on time to the right people has been a huge obstacle in India. And one of the things that we did as part of the G2P infrastructure is to create world's largest G2P rails. Another set of infrastructure that is used beyond G2P, by the way. But it is one of the government continues to be one of the largest use case. We transferred about $450 billion over the last decade to more than, nearly 1 billion people, 960 million people. So it's a very, very, very large program that is driving. Plus the UPI here, PromptPay in Thailand, or Pix in Brazil. We have Brazilian friends here. Massive P2P, P2M payment infrastructure beyond the cards. So in addition to cards being expanded, we also expanded the QR code and other based payments, mobile-based payment, right? But what it did trigger is the idea that, and this is a very, very interesting learning from India, that Indians were fast becoming data rich while they are still not economically rich. So they participate, 500 million people participating in digital transaction, digital payments, UPI today, 500 million people participate. Whether you're receiving money, sending money, you are creating digital trail. And the digital trail, if unleveraged, remains locked in to systems. So one of the big shifts that India made in 2016 with Nandan Nilekani's seminal talk on data democracy is about shifting that mental model that maybe we must relook at the idea of personal data, digital footprints, as an economic asset for people to grow their own, progress, to make their own progress. Whether it's individuals or SMEs, having the ability to harness their footprints to be able to drive access to products, access to capital, access to services, and so on, access to opportunities in general. And that drove lots of discussion around credentialing, data, open data infrastructure. Not open data doesn't mean public. I meant access to my personal data. And if you look at UK and France and so on, open finance, open banking, these are not new constructs. But India has been actively investing in such infrastructure in India as well, as part of this journey, because this was one way to bring formalization further so that they can get opportunity, access to opportunities, capital, products, and services. But what we are realizing, though, this is a path, this is what we are doing today so far, is that all these stepping stones were great, but not enough. So we had to reimagine the next possibilities because, again, people are movement of people, movement of goods, and movement of money is actually not restricted to geographies. And that continues to happen whether you constrain a little bit because of geopolitics, eventually it finds its way to be able to manage, because that's how the world is continuing to grow. And it might be whether it's in East Africa region, West Africa region, whether it's India or South Asia region, it doesn't really matter. This movement of goods and movement of data and movement of money has to be unthrottled. And unthrottling has to happen by putting individuals and businesses at the center of a design. And these three elements were the essence of much of what we do when we think about DPIs. One, ensure every digital transaction allows individuals, businesses, things to identify themselves. Their ability to prove who they are is an integral part of initiating a contract, a transaction or interaction. So identity is who am I plays a very key role. It's not about individual identity alone. It's a business identity, identity of things, identity of anything that is transacting in the system. And then subsequently, we also focus a little bit. We talked about data as asset, but we're still not there to convert real world and digital assets to be transactable, trustable, and transactable. The today's assets are very much in paper world. That means if I have a battery bank or a agriculture crop, they remain very, very, very low transacting nature because of the inability to trust, inability to verify, inability to transact, inability to lend against, and so on. And if every bank has to do that repeatedly, the cost of doing that is very high. So it is important for us to convert assets into a verifiable, transactable, low-cost asset. This is a very fundamental shift in large cross-border, low-cost, high-volume trade scenarios. So that's an area that we have to focus. But these two are only enablers for something what everybody wants to do. Convert my asset and identities and data and money and everything else into be able to trade or transact or interact. That's why I think a lot of us are actually starting to look at what does it mean to reimagine DPI globally as well. And that's where I think much of the discussion today was very, very relevant for us to be able to create global standards, global technology interoperability, and global. And now you can, on top of that, you can actually program geopolitical constraints. Now, there might be regulatory or other constraints that allow a bank or an individual not to transact with a particular country. That's okay. We are not being opinionated. We are saying that those rules can be programmed on top of a global infrastructure. That infrastructure, the idea of DPI, again goes back to the three layers. A globally interoperable underpinning driven by safe, scalable, affordable, open technology. On top of that, all highways need rules of the game. You can't lay the infrastructure without rules. So you have to be able to program those rules, KYC rules, counterparty checks rules, PML rules, and so on that you want to be able to program on top of that. Of course, you need to be able to do that. And then allow entrepreneurs to drive innovation on top of it, because that's where the real unlock of value will happen to the society, not in the bottom two layers. They're just enablers. Much inspired by internet. No different. So when you look at the idea of standard, protocols, interoperability, decentralized nature of it allows the same idea, architectural inspiration of the earlier efforts that we have seen that work at humanity scale. So we have to continue to push that agenda towards digital identities, digital assets, and digital transactions that we must be able to enable. But one underscored or less talked about, and yesterday we had a fantastic session in the afternoon, is the idea that DPI is not about government. DPI is not about centralized government-funded projects. We are not talking GovTech. We are not talking e-governance. We are talking the idea of building extremely minimal infrastructure that allows market to innovate. So the story of DPI has been about private innovation. Entrepreneurs finding no different from internet. When you create that impetus, when you create that playground, entrepreneurs rise up to recompose, recalibrate, create new applications that otherwise we could not have imagined before. Why? To cater to the large population in the long tail that allows them to actually start participating. And that brings the three core pillars of DPI thinking. Policy alone won't cut it. Policy combined with globally interoperable infrastructure. By the way, when I say infrastructure, it can be just a set of specifications. Nothing more, not even software. You guys can build software. Idea is to create global interoperability and trust layers at the bottom. But these two won't balance itself. You need a real ingredient. Into that is the innovation for market. So combining these three ingredients in a smart fashion so that one is not overdoing the other. Too much policy with no infrastructure will remain legal. Too much infrastructure means you are actually eating into market innovation possibilities. But if you leave everything to market, you have an alternate problem, competition problem, monopoly problem, and other issues that you will have to eventually deal with. So how do you balance this? No perfect answer. It's something that you need to constantly calibrate. But that's the essence of DPI. Essence of DPI is to calibrate that and then push for the next generation. Now I'll speak about three things that we want to cover globally. And that's where the global partnerships, global efforts, global standard or specification discussions must go towards that, is to allow going in one country at a time to go beyond countries, to go cross-border, to actually unlock that possibility. And one of them we are very focused on is converting data as an economic asset. I talked about it. Today, much of the cross-border, customs, paperwork, or identity itself, when you travel, a student traveling from here to Europe or US eventually carries paper. We are back to using paper because there is no other way. we are able to carry verifiable data trails, verifiable credentials that I have to the next country. So we are going back to very silly mechanisms of paper with original paper, paper with seal, signature, wet signature, which is just not scalable because you can fake everything. So I think if you want a high trust, low cost, use a control mechanism, you need to go back to asking basic questions. How do we convert data, affiliations, achievements, credentials, transaction trails into cryptographically protected, non-tamperable proof that individuals and SMEs can carry, so that when I contract with the counterparty, whether it is across the border or domestic, both can trust each other and transact at a low cost, high volume. We are working on a paper. So if you are interested in contributing, you will be attributed fully. You can actually join. This is an open source effort. Just putting our thoughts together. You can scan if you want to, and then actually contribute to that paper. This paper actually reimagine what is data as an economic asset and how does data flow work. Personal data flow. I'm not talking about bulk data and so on. My own things. The fact that I worked in a company. As a driver, the fact that I worked in a company like Uber. The fact that I have a reputation score of 4.9. How do I harness this and make sure that is portable and verifiable? Very simple, powerful imagination that you can participate in contributing. Then we are actually asking the question that alone is not enough. We also need to push beyond credentialing into tracking of provenance tracking of some of this when it comes to scope 3, when it comes to climate financing, when it comes to lending, global lending. If you want global lending paths to open up, you need to be able to actually tokenize them. Not only credentialize them, you need to be able to tokenize them. I'm not talking particular technology. I'm talking about idea of tokenizing beyond credentializing to be able to lock, transact, trust, and actually go cross-border. There is a very powerful paper. This is not an Indian effort at all, by the way. Some Indians are participating, but other than that, it's not a India government effort or anything. It's a truly global effort that actually started from between Basel. We launched in Washington, and we are actually doing this because there's an imagination of a bunch of both regulators, financial regulators, and technologies coming together to create a much more universal infrastructure that allows assets, including money and data, to be able to actually move much more freely in the control of the user. So very, very interesting possibilities emerge. You can scan that. There is a global sandbox that is coming up. Okay, I need to get extra minute just because this damn thing doesn't work. Okay, so we are actually doing design. There's a global sandbox that has come together. Very large financial institutions around the world and other regulators are participating. If anybody wants to go check out this, completely an open source effort to design specifications, protocols, specifications, and an architecture. Not software. Software will be written by private marketplace. So this is not an effort to write the software per se. This is to write the architecture and the specifications and the protocol, interoperable protocols that allow the market to create the next generation, and cheekily called finternet, as big as internet, financial internet, right? So go for that. Go check it out. And I mean, I want to bring back this picture because both we talked about data and tokenization. We are still dealing with these two, identity and assets. We still have a big question in our mind in terms of transactions. And that's because, especially countries like India, okay, this formalizing the economy has been a very hard problem for us. That's because we are in this mode. I did not put India there because India is exactly the same way. All digital transaction systems are under 10% penetration, including B2C commerce, one of the largest investment that has gone into the country. Less than 10%. 90+% of 1.4 billion people are still transacting informally. Informal economy creates very low performing, high asymmetry, high cost, inefficient microeconomies, very local economies driving. It'll never give the boost for any country like India, and this we see across the globe, across global south. Now fundamentally there's an issue because of the extreme context variance. This is what we are seeing, inability for us to unify through a single platform. That's because single platforms don't. If the single platform, one commerce platform, actually does 90% of our B2C, we might have a monopoly issue, but it's never happening because of the extreme diversity and scale we have. So one of the things that we have been asking ourselves, what did internet teach us? Internet taught us that internet is a network of platforms. It's not one platform. Internet is not one platform. It's a network of platforms. Could we reimagine what originally, Sir Tim Berners-Lee wrote, the semantic web and a transaction web beyond the content web that we experienced in the last 20 years? It is absolutely a possibility. This is a World Wide Economic Forum paper analyzing what we call an open transaction networks. If you want to read, you can read it. There is significant effort. And I'll then close it out on the AI, because we have further discussion coming up with another panel, is that why AI, as Seth was talking about, is a supercharging of DPI. We don't see AI and DPI as a DPI plus AI. It's a DPI to the power of AI, because we cannot get the next billion people into the transacting economy unless we close the access barrier. Access to knowledge and information, and access to interactions with the computing. We are investing, some of you are investing in the voice and other technologies precisely to get the next billion people to be able to go beyond entertainment world to transacting world. This is very, very key for us, and that's why we are investing in many of the efforts that you see in India as well. And we'll see this across the world. So in conclusion, very simple. If we repeat what India repeated in the last 15 years, one use case, one system, and one country at a time, we'll all be dead and gone, 100 plus years. And yesterday somebody argued that this will never happen. Now forget 100 plus years. You're optimistic. It will not happen. So maybe repeating what we did is not what we want to do. We want to be able to think even bigger. That's where our global coalition is going to come into picture. Because one country, one system, one use case is not how we want to put it. We want to be able to think like internet. We want to think, how does universal infrastructure with the user at the center starts playing out so that countries can program their rules rather than invest in bottom-up everything. People just onboarded them into internet. Can we do that? It's a very important question. And this is why I think we believe India, especially India, I can speak for India for sure, or maybe 7 billion people, 2 million businesses around the world, needs technology, uninhibited access to technology. May not be cutting edge, but definitely uninhibited access to technology. And I think technology needs India.